The crystal whiskey glass shattered against the marble floor of Luca Salvatore's office, amber liquid spreading like blood across the white stone. His knuckles were white, gripping the edge of his mahogany desk so hard the wood groaned under the pressure. "Say that again," he whispered, his voice deadly calm, the kind of calm that made grown men confess their sins before he even asked. Slowly. Marco, his most trusted enforcer, swallowed hard. In 15 years of service, he'd never seen his boss like this. Not during territory wars, not when the Colombians tried to muscle in on their ports, not even when his own cousin betrayed him. "She's at Ristorante Maggio, boss. Table by the window. With a man. 4 words, just 4 simple words, and they'd turned Luca Salvatore, the most feared Mafia boss in all of Sicily, the man who controlled everything from Palermo to Catania, into something he'd never been before. Powerless. What man? The question came out like gravel scraping against his throat. Marco shifted his weight. "We don't know yet. Ran his plates, rental car. We're working on it." Luca's jaw clenched. His assistant. His Julia. The woman who knew every secret in his empire, who anticipated his needs before he voiced them, who'd sat across from him 6 days a week for 3 years, was on a date. Since when did she date? More importantly, since when did he care? "Get the car," Lucas said, already moving toward the door, grabbing his jacket from the leather chair. "Boss, is that—" "Now, Marco." 20 minutes later, Lucas sat in the back of his black Mercedes, parked across the street from Ristorante Maggio, the restaurant he owned. The restaurant where, through the wide glass windows, he could see her, Giulia Romano. She was laughing. Actually laughing, her head tilted back, dark hair cascading over her shoulders, hair that was usually pulled into a severe bun for work. She wore a red dress. Red. He'd never seen her in anything but black, white, or navy business attire. The man across from her, tall, clean-cut, probably some corporate nobody, reached across the table and touched her hand. Something inside Luca's chest twisted violently. "Find out everything about him," Luca said quietly. "Where he works, where he lives, his blood type. I want to know what he ate for breakfast 3 years ago." Marco nodded, phone already out. Luca couldn't look away, couldn't stop watching as this stranger made his assistant, his Julia, smile in a way he'd never seen before. Soft, relaxed, happy. When had she become his Julia? When had the sight of another man touching her hand made him want to burn down his own restaurant? The man leaned in closer, and Julia didn't pull away. "Boss?" Marco's voice seemed far away. "You all right?" No. He wasn't all right. For 3 years, Giulia Romano had been the one constant in his chaotic, blood-soaked world. Professional, efficient, untouchable. She organized his life, managed his legitimate businesses, and never once looked at him like he was anything other than her employer. He'd convinced himself he preferred it that way. He'd been lying to himself. "How long have they been in there?" Luca asked. 40 minutes. 40 minutes. Of watching her live a life he knew nothing about. 40 minutes of realizing that for 3 years he had taken for granted that she'd always be there. That she'd never look at another man the way she was looking at this nobody. That she'd never leave. The man paid the check. They stood. He helped her with her coat. A gesture so simple, so intimate, that Luca felt his control slipping further. They walked toward the door. "Boss," Marco warned. "What are you doing?" Luca was already out of the car. He didn't have a plan. The great Luca Salvatore, who planned every move 3 steps ahead, who'd built an empire on calculation and control, had no idea what he was doing as he crossed the street. All he knew was that he couldn't watch her walk away with another man. Not tonight. Not ever. Julia stepped out of the restaurant, still smiling, and then she saw him. The smile vanished, replaced by shock, then something else. Something that looked almost like guilt. Mr. Salvatore? Her voice was steady, professional, but he caught the slight tremor. What are you doing here? The man beside her looked between them, confused. Julia? You know this man. This man, Luca said, his eyes never leaving Julia's face, is her boss. Oh. The man extended his hand. Nice to meet you. I'm leaving. Luca didn't shake his hand. Now. Excuse me? The man's pleasant expression hardened. I don't think... Luca. Julia's voice cut through the tension. She'd never called him by his first name before. Always Mr. Salvatore, or Sir. The sound of his name on her lips did something dangerous to his restraint. What are you doing? Good question. What was he doing? Standing in the middle of the street, about to cause a scene over his assistant's personal life, like some jealous... Oh no. The realization hit him like a bullet to the chest. He was jealous. Furiously, irrationally, consuming jealous. We need to talk, he said, about work. Her eyes narrowed. She knew he was lying. At 10 o'clock, on a Saturday night. It's urgent. I'm sure it can wait until Monday, Mr. Salvatore. The formal address felt like a slap, like she was putting distance between them, reminding him of boundaries he'd suddenly, desperately wanted to cross. The man, the interloper, wrapped a protective arm around Julia's shoulders. Listen, buddy, I don't know who you think you are. I know exactly who I am, Luca said softly, dangerously. The question is, do you know who you're touching? Julia stepped away from the man, positioning herself between them. Smart. She'd seen enough of Luca's world to know when violence was a heartbeat away. Paolo, she said to the man, her voice gentle, I think you should go. Julia, please. I'll call you. No, she wouldn't. Luca would make sure of that. Paolo hesitated, clearly wanting to argue, to be the hero. Finally, he nodded stiffly. Call me when you get home. So, I know you're safe. The implication was clear. Safe from Luca. Paolo walked away, throwing one last, concerned look over his shoulder. Then it was just the two of them, standing on the empty street, the space between them charged with something Luca couldn't name. Something that felt like it had been building for 3 years. Since when do you date? The question escaped before he could stop it. Julia stared at him. I'm sorry. What? Since when? He repeated, taking a step closer. Do you date? She laughed. A sharp, incredulous sound. Are you seriously asking me that? What I do with my personal time is none of your business, Mr. Salvatore. Everything about you is my business. The words hung in the air between them. Too honest. Too revealing. Julia's eyes widened. What? Luca didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because he was staring at her lips, painted red to match her dress, and thinking thoughts that had no place between a boss and his employee. Thoughts that had been there all along, buried under layers of denial. Luca, she whispered, and there it was again. His name in her voice, unraveling him. What's really going on? Everything. Nothing. The careful world he'd constructed was falling apart because his assistant had worn a red dress and smiled at another man. Get in the car, Julia. No. He wasn't used to that word. Not from her. Not from anyone. We need to talk. Then talk. Right here. Not here. Not where anyone could see him losing control. Please. The please did it. She blinked, surprised. He wasn't a man who said please, and then slowly, carefully nodded. They walked to his car in silence. Marco wisely didn't say a word as they got in the back seat, just started driving toward Luca's estate in the hills. Where are we going? Julia asked. Somewhere private. Luca, this is. Tell me about him, he interrupted. Paolo. She turned to face him fully. Why? How long have you been seeing him? That was our second date. Second. Only the second. Relief flooded through him, immediate and overwhelming. There was still time. Time to. To what? To claim her? To tell her that the thought of her with another man made him want to destroy things? Are you going to see him again? His voice came out rougher than intended. Julia's eyes searched his face. He wondered what she saw there. If she could read the war raging inside him, between the man who'd sworn never to let anyone close enough to hurt him, and the man who was realizing he'd already failed. I don't know, she said finally. Maybe. He's nice. Normal. Safe. Safe. The word was an accusation. Everything Luca wasn't. You think I can't keep you safe? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean, Julia? She looked away, out the window at the city lights, blurring past. He's not complicated. Being with him doesn't come with risks. He's just a regular guy who wants to take me to dinner and... And what? Luca's hand shot out, catching her chin, turning her face back to him. The touch sent electricity through him. And make you laugh? Touch you? Take you home? Her breath hitched. Luca. Because I can do those things. The confession tore out of him. I can make you laugh. I can... You're my boss, she whispered. I know. This is inappropriate. I know. People in your world don't date. They own, they possess, they destroy. I know. His thumb brushed across her cheek. But I saw you with him. And I... What? Her voice was barely audible. You what? He what? Lost his mind? Realized that 3 years of telling himself he only valued her professionally was the biggest lie he'd ever told? Discovered that the emptiness in his life wasn't from the violence and the blood and the constant war. It was from watching her leave his office every night and knowing she wasn't coming home with him. I couldn't breathe, he admitted. Watching him touch you, watching you smile at him like that. Like he was someone who mattered. He could matter, she said, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. Given time, maybe... No. The word was absolute. He can't. Because you're mine, Julia. She should have been angry. Should have slapped him, demanded he take her home, threatened to quit. Instead, her pupils dilated, her lips parted, and Luca knew. Knew that whatever this dangerous thing was between them, he wasn't alone in feeling it. I'm not anyone's, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Then why? He leaned closer, close enough to feel her breath on his face. Have you never looked at any other man the way you're looking at me right now? The car stopped. They'd reached his estate, but neither of them moved. They were suspended in this moment. 3 years of professional distance shattering like the whiskey glass in his office. This is a mistake, Julia whispered. Probably. You'll break my heart. Maybe. His honesty was brutal. But I'll burn down the world before I let anyone else touch you. That's not romantic, Luca. That's possessive. I never claimed to be a good man. His hand slid into her hair. But I'm yours if you'll have me. You're a mafia boss. Yes. You kill people. When necessary. This is insane. Completely. I should leave. Right now. Go home. Block your number. Forget this ever happened. Yes, he agreed. You should. Neither of them moved. The driver's door opened and closed. Marco was giving them privacy. The engine ticked as it cooled. The lights of the city glittered below them. Tell me to stop, Luca said. Tell me you feel nothing, and I'll take you home. I'll never mention this again. We'll go back to how things were. You're lying, she said. We can't go back. She was right. They'd crossed a line simply by sitting here, by letting the truth spill between them. Monday morning would be different. Every day would be different. No, he admitted. We can't. So what now? Julia asked. What happens when the most dangerous man in Sicily decides he wants his assistant? I don't want my assistant. Luca's voice was raw. I want Giulia Romano, the woman who takes her coffee black with one sugar, who hums when she thinks no one's listening, who rearranges the flowers in my office because she thinks the original arrangement lacks balance, the woman who's too smart for her own good and too brave for mine. Tears shimmered in her eyes. You notice those things? I notice everything about you. I have for 3 years. I just didn't let myself understand what it meant. And what does it mean? It means, he pulled her closer, that seeing you with another man tonight made me realize I can't pretend anymore. It means you're the last thought I have every night and the first every morning. It means I'm terrified because I've spent my entire life making sure no one could hurt me, and then you walked into my office with your resume and your stubborn chin and your eyes that see too much. And somehow, without either of us realizing it, you became the only person who could destroy me. A tear slipped down her cheek. Luca, it means I'm in love with you, he finished. And I'm sorry it took another man touching you for me to figure it out. But now that I have, I can't unknow it. I can't unsee you. Can't go back to pretending you're just my employee when you're so much more than that. Silence filled the car. Outside, the night was quiet except for the distant sound of the city. Then Julia did something Luca didn't expect. She laughed, not the polite laugh she'd given Paolo. This was different, edged with hysteria and disbelief and something that sounded almost like relief. You're insane, she said. This is insane. I'm insane for even considering... Considering what? Hope flared in his chest. I told myself, she continued, every single day for 3 years, that what I felt for you was just professional respect. That the way my heart raced when you walked into the room was just anxiety about doing a good job. That I wore your favorite colors by accident. That I stayed late because I was dedicated to my work, not because I couldn't bear to leave you yet. Luca's world tilted. Julia... Tonight, she interrupted. When Paolo asked me to dinner, I said yes because I thought maybe if I tried hard enough, I could feel for someone else what I feel for you. That I could be normal, have a normal life with a normal man who doesn't have blood on his hands. And his heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. And I spent the entire dinner wishing he was you. She met his eyes. I watched him smile and heard your voice, felt him touch my hand and imagined yours. He was perfectly nice, perfectly safe, perfectly wrong. Because he's not you, Luca. No one is you. And I've tried so hard to not fall in love with you, to not imagine what it would be like if you looked at me like I was more than just your efficient assistant. If you touched me like I was yours. You are mine, he said fiercely. You've been mine since the moment you walked into my life. I was just too blind to see it. This won't be easy, she warned. Your world, your enemies, your family. I don't care. People will think I'm using you. Let them. I'll be in danger. I'll protect you. His hand cupped her face. With my life, Julia. I swear it. You can't promise that. I can promise I'll die trying. She studied his face, searching for lies, for doubts. He let her see everything, the need, the fear, the love that had been growing in the dark spaces of his heart for 3 years. Finally she whispered, if we do this, if we try, there's no going back. You understand that. Once people know, Once your world knows there's no returning to before. I don't want before, Luca said. I want after. Every after. With you. Even though I'm stubborn. Especially because you're stubborn. Even though I'm not from your world. You're my world, Julia. Everything else is just territory. She smiled then, really smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. I must be out of my mind, she said. Is that a yes? It's a you better not make me regret this, Luca Salvatore, because I know where you keep all your secrets. He laughed, a sound of pure relief and joy, and pulled her into his arms. She came willingly, melting against him like she'd always belonged there. I have a confession, he murmured against her hair. Another one? I bought Ristorante Maggio 3 months ago. She pulled back to look at him. You own that restaurant? Yes. The restaurant where I had my date tonight? Yes. Luca, did you follow you? Monitor your plans? Have Marco report your movements? He had the grace to look slightly sheepish. Only for the last 3 months. 3 months? She hit his chest. You've been stalking me? Not stalking, protectively observing. That's literally the definition of stalking. In my defense, he said, I didn't understand why I was doing it. I told myself it was about security, making sure you were safe, that it was just responsible management. And now I understand I was a jealous fool who couldn't stand the thought of you with anyone else, but couldn't admit it to myself. She should have been angry. Any rational woman would be furious. Instead, Julia shook her head, a reluctant smile tugging at her lips. You're impossible. But you love me anyway? Her smile softened. Unfortunately for both of us, yes. I love you anyway. The kiss was inevitable. 3 years of denial, of restraint, of professionalism combusting in the back seat of his Mercedes. She tasted like wine and hope and coming home, and Luca knew, absolutely knew, that he'd burn his entire empire to the ground before he let her go. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Julia laughed softly. What? Luca asked. I was supposed to call Paolo, to let him know I got home safely. You're not calling Paolo. No, she agreed, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. I'm not. Good. He pulled out his phone, typed a quick message to Marco. Tell the men. Julia Romano is under my protection. Anyone who looks at her wrong answers to me. Luca, she protested. That's excessive. That's just the beginning, he promised. Tomorrow I'm moving you into the estate. I'm doubling your salary. You're not doing any of that, Julia interrupted firmly. I'm keeping my apartment. My salary stays the same. And I'm still your assistant. I worked too hard for that position to give it up. He frowned. But no buts. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. I won't be some kept woman. I won't have people saying I slept my way to the top. You're too stubborn for your own good. That's why you love me. He couldn't argue with that. Fine, he conceded. But you're getting a security detail. Luca, non-negotiable, Julia. You're mine now. That makes you a target. She sighed, but nodded. Okay, but discreet security. I won't have armed guards following me into the grocery store. Define discreet. Luca, fine, discreet. I promise. They sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the lights of the city below. Luca felt something he hadn't experienced in years, maybe ever. Peace. What are you thinking? Julia asked. That tonight I was prepared to kill a man for touching your hand. That's concerning. That finding you has made me both stronger and more vulnerable than I've ever been. She was quiet for a moment. Are you scared? Terrified. Good. She kissed his jaw. That means you understand what's at stake. Everything, he said simply. Everything is at stake. Then I guess we'll just have to make sure we don't lose, Julia said. And in that moment, Luca Salvatore, the most feared mafia boss in Sicily, realized he'd already won, because he had her. And nothing, not his enemies, not his past, not the danger that came with his name, would ever take her from him. He'd make sure of it, even if it meant burning the entire world down. 3 years earlier, the woman sitting across from Luca's desk was not what he expected. He'd interviewed 12 candidates for the assistant position, 12 perfectly qualified, perfectly terrified individuals who'd barely made eye contact and agreed with everything he said. People who understood that working for Luca Salvatore meant silence, obedience, and an absolute lack of curiosity about his business affairs. Julia Romano was different. For starters, she looked him directly in the eye. Her resume was impressive: degree in business administration, fluent in 4 languages, previous experience managing executives at a Fortune 500 company. But it was her cover letter that had caught his attention. I understand your business requires discretion, efficiency, and someone who knows when to ask questions and when to remain silent. I'm that person. I don't scare easily, I don't gossip, and I have no interest in being anything other than exceptional at my job. If you hire me, you'll never have to think about the logistics of your day again. That's my promise. Bold. Maybe too bold for someone applying to work for a man whose reputation preceded him. Miss Romano, Lucas said, leaning back in his chair, you've had impressive positions. Why leave corporate America for this? This was his legitimate import-export business. At least, that's what the paperwork said. Because corporate America is boring, Julia said bluntly. I spent 5 years making sure executives remembered their wives' birthdays and managing expense reports. I'm overqualified for what they needed and underutilized for what I could do. I want a challenge. And you think working for me would be challenging? I think, she said carefully, that managing someone with your diverse interests would require someone who's adaptable, discreet, and doesn't ask unnecessary questions. I'm all three. My diverse interests, he repeated, amused despite himself. Is that what we're calling it? Unless you'd prefer I use a different euphemism, Mr. Salvatore. Most people wouldn't dare use humor in a job interview with him. Most people understood that Luca Salvatore wasn't someone you joked with, but there was no mockery in her eyes. Just a clear, direct intelligence that suggested she knew exactly who he was and had decided she could handle it anyway. I see you speak Italian, he said, switching languages mid-sentence. Fluently, she replied without missing a beat, also in perfect Italian. My grandmother was from Naples. I grew up speaking it at home. Sicilian? Some. I'm willing to learn more if the position requires it. It might. He studied her. Mid-20s, dark hair pulled back in a professional bun, subtle makeup, clothes that were expensive but not showy. Everything about her screamed competence. The hours are unpredictable. I don't have a family to go home to. The work is confidential. I've signed NDAs before. I'll sign yours too. Some of what you'll see or hear will be none of my business unless you make it my business, she finished. Mr. Salvatore, I understand what this job entails. I've done my research. I know your reputation. I know what people say about you, and I know that what I need is a position where my skills are valued and where I'm trusted to do my job without micromanagement. What you need is someone who can manage your schedule, your legitimate business affairs, and your public image without becoming a liability. We can help each other. And if you see something you shouldn't, then I'll forget it immediately. Her gaze didn't waver. I'm very good at forgetting things that aren't my concern. Luca should have sent her away. Anyone this self-assured was either foolish or dangerous, but something about her appealed to him. Maybe it was the directness. Maybe it was the intelligence in her eyes. Or maybe it was simply that he was tired of people who trembled in his presence. "You start Monday," he said. 7 a.m. "Don't be late." Surprise flickered across her face, the first crack in her professional armor. "That's it? No more questions?" "I'll know everything I need to know about you by Monday morning." He smiled without humor. "That's one of my diverse interests." Understanding dawned in her eyes. He was going to have her investigated, thoroughly. "You won't find anything concerning," she said, standing and extending her hand. "I'm exactly who I appear to be, Mr. Salvatore. Someone who's very good at her job and wants the chance to prove it." Her handshake was firm, professional, and when she walked out of his office, Luca found himself watching her go with more interest than he'd felt in months. By Sunday evening, he'd received Marco's full report. Giulia Romano was, as she'd claimed, exactly who she appeared to be. No criminal record, no concerning associations, no financial troubles. She paid her taxes, visited her grandmother every Sunday, and had ended her last relationship 8 months ago when her boyfriend proposed and she'd realized she wanted her career more than marriage. "She's clean, boss," Marco had said. "Almost suspiciously clean. Or she's just what she says. Someone good at their job." "You're really hiring her?" Monday morning. Marco had looked skeptical but said nothing. He'd learned long ago not to question Luca's decisions. That had been 3 years ago. 3 years of Giulia Romano being the best assistant he'd ever had. She managed his legitimate businesses with ruthless efficiency, organized his schedule to perfection, and never once asked about the meetings he attended that weren't in her calendar. She'd seen things, of course. It was inevitable. Men with blood on their knuckles leaving his office, phone calls he took in Sicilian with a tone that suggested violence, packages that arrived and disappeared without explanation. And true to her word, she'd forgotten every single thing that wasn't her concern. She was professional, efficient, utterly unflappable. He'd told himself that was all she was, all she needed to be. For 3 years he'd been lying to himself. "Your 10 o'clock is here, Mr. Salvatore, and your coffee." Giulia entered Luca's office with her usual morning efficiency, setting the espresso on his desk exactly where he liked it, right side, 2 inches from the edge. She'd learned his preferences within the first week and had never deviated since. "Which 10 o'clock?" Luca asked, not looking up from the contract he was reviewing. "The legitimate one or the other one?" "The legitimate one. Mr. Chen from the shipping company. The other meeting isn't until 2. That was their code. The other meeting meant his actual business. The business that paid for the marble floors and the armed guards and the villa in the hills. "Push Chen to 11. I need another hour with these contracts." "Already done. I told him you had an emergency call with your distributors in Rome." Luca glanced up. "Did I?" "You do now. Lorenzo called while you were in the shower this morning. There's an issue with the shipment from Naples. He said it wasn't urgent, but I thought you'd want to know before your day got complicated." This was what made Giulia invaluable. She didn't just manage his schedule, she anticipated problems and solved them before they became his concern. "What kind of issue?" He didn't specify, just said to call when you had a moment. She pulled out her tablet, scanning the day's agenda. "After Chen, you have lunch with your mother. Cancel it." "I've tried. 3 times. She's insisting. Something about it being the anniversary of your father's death and family obligation." Luca grimaced. His mother's guilt trips were legendary. "Fine, but make it short. I have the other meeting at 2. Already arranged. I've booked you at La Terrazza for 1 hour exactly. Your mother likes the pasta there, so she'll be in a good mood. I've also had flowers sent to your father's grave from you, so she can't complain you forgot. He stared at her. You sent flowers to my father's grave? Every year on the anniversary. You're welcome. For 3 years she'd been doing this, managing not just his schedule but his life, his relationships, his obligations. She knew his mother's favorite restaurant, his father's death date, his coffee preference, his suit sizes, everything. What would I do without you, Julia? Crash and burn spectacularly, she said without looking up. Now, about this afternoon's other meeting. What about it? Marco mentioned it might run long. Should I clear your evening schedule? Might not be necessary. Luca sipped his espresso. Perfect, as always. It's just a negotiation. With the Albanians? Julia said flatly. He looked at her sharply. How do you know that? Marco's been ordering Albanian takeout for 3 days. He only does that when you're meeting with them. I think it's his version of cultural sensitivity. Also, you've been tense all week, which means the meeting matters. She was too observant for her own good, and yet her tone remained neutral, professional. She wasn't asking questions, just stating facts. The Albanians want a larger cut of the port operations, Luca said, deciding to be honest. Not about everything, but about enough. They're overstepping, and this afternoon's meeting will make them step back, one way or another. Should I schedule extra cleaning staff for the warehouse? It took him a moment to understand what she was implying. Then he laughed, a genuine, surprised sound. Are you asking if I'm going to kill someone, Julia? She met his eyes calmly. I'm asking if the warehouse will need cleaning after your negotiation. It's a practical question. You're terrifying sometimes, you know that? That's why you pay me, Mr. Salvatore. She was right. It was exactly why he paid her. Because she saw his world clearly, understood the implications, and never flinched, never judged, just managed the logistics like everything else in his life. No extra cleaning staff, he said finally. This one will stay civilized. Good. I like our regular cleaning crew. Breaking in a new team would be tedious. She made a note on her tablet. I'll make sure Marco has the usual security arrangements anyway, just in case their definition of civilized differs from yours. You've been talking to Marco. We have coffee sometimes. He gives me the security updates I need to know. I tell him when to expect unusual meetings. It's efficient. Of course she did. Of course she and Marco had their own system. Julia had systematized his entire life so thoroughly that even his enforcers coordinated with her. What else should I know about today? Luca asked. Your mother will ask about grandchildren. I've prepared a list of deflection topics. Your sister's new promotion, your cousin's wedding next month, the charitable foundation you definitely do not run, but she thinks you do. The foundation I don't run? The Foundation for Sicilian Youth Development. I created it last year. You're the anonymous primary donor, and it provides scholarships to underprivileged children. Your mother loves talking about it. Makes her feel like you're not completely irredeemable. Lucas set down his espresso. You created a charitable foundation in my name. Technically it's anonymous, but yes. You needed a tax write-off for some of the legitimate business profits, and your mother needed something wholesome to brag about at church. 2 birds, 1 foundation. How much am I donating? 500,000 euros annually. Don't worry, it's built into your budget. You haven't even noticed it missing. He should have been angry. She'd created an entire foundation without his approval, was donating his money, and had apparently been doing it for a year, but instead, he felt something else. Admiration. You're something else. Julia Romano. She smiled slightly. A rare break in her professional demeanor. I know. That's why you haven't fired me for being presumptuous. I don't think I could fire you at this point. My entire life would collapse. Correct assessment. She glanced at her watch. You have 45 minutes before Chen arrives. I suggest you call Lorenzo, review his concerns, and then prepare for the shipping negotiations. I'll have fresh espresso sent in at 10:30. You'll need it for Chen. He talks in circles. Anything else? Yes. She hesitated, and Luca noticed the slight shift in her posture. Something personal was coming. I need to leave early on Friday, around 4 if possible. In 3 years, Julia had never asked to leave early, never called in sick, never taken a vacation despite his insistence that she use her accumulated time off. Why? The question came out sharper than he intended. He didn't like the thought of her having obligations he didn't know about. Personal appointment. I'll make sure everything is handled before I leave, and I'll be available by phone if you need anything. What kind of appointment? She raised an eyebrow. The personal kind, Mr. Salvatore. Julia. It's just a doctor's appointment, she said, but there was something in her tone. Something evasive. A doctor's appointment wouldn't make her evasive, which meant it wasn't really a doctor's appointment. You're lying. I'm entitled to my privacy. Not when you work for me. It was the wrong thing to say. He knew at the moment the words left his mouth. Julia's expression shuddered, going cold in a way he'd never seen directed at him. I'm your assistant, Mr. Salvatore. Not your property. My personal life is exactly that. Personal. I'm asking for a few hours off, which I'm entitled to under my contract. Will that be a problem? She was right. She was absolutely right. And he was being unreasonable. But the thought of her having some secret appointment, some part of her life he didn't know about, bothered him more than it should. Fine, he said stiffly. Take Friday afternoon. Thank you. Her voice was professionally neutral, but he'd hurt her. He could see it in the way she held herself, the careful blankness of her expression. Julia, I'll send Lorenzo's information to your email. Excuse me. She left his office without another word, the door clicking shut with careful precision. Luca sat back in his chair, staring at the space she'd vacated. In 3 years, they'd never had a moment like that. Never had tension between them. She was always professional, always pleasant, always there. He'd taken her for granted. Worse, he'd treated her like she belonged to him. Like he had the right to know every detail of her life, simply because she managed his. Marco appeared in the doorway minutes later. Boss, you ready for the call with Lorenzo? In a minute. Luca was still staring at the door. Marco, what do you know about Julia's personal life? Marco shifted uncomfortably. Why are you asking? Just answer the question. Not much. She keeps to herself, visits her grandmother on Sundays, goes to the gym sometimes, has a few friends she meets for drinks occasionally. Does she date? Boss, does. She? Date. Marco sighed. Not that I've seen. She had a boyfriend when she started working here, but that ended in the first few months. Since then, nothing serious. Why? She's leaving early Friday. Said it was a personal appointment, but wouldn't elaborate. So, maybe it's personal. Stay tuned for more.